Early last week, I flew into the Newark airport and on to my daughter's house in South Orange, New Jersey, where we celebrated Thanksgiving. We celebrated Thanksgiving with what seemed like the whole neighborhood. The last count I had was that there were 14 of us. But part of the highlight of not just being with them, which I don't get to do often enough, was on Tuesday we went into New York to go to the theater. Saw beautiful The Carole King story. Great music. Came home and went through old albums and have a half a dozen in the car that I can listen to for a while. Wednesday we spent all day cleaning house and cooking. My son-in-law is an excellent cook, to the point where he is often recruited by New York chefs to come help them do private parties. And we cooked. And we cooked. And we cooked some more. Nobody went home hungry. The problem was that the temperature kept dropping. Trying to cook on a grill, or 3 grills as the case may have been, when the temperature is going down, is just really not a lot of fun. And on Thanksgiving morning, it was 16 degrees. And the cry went up. What about the parade? What about the parade? We turned on the TV set, and there were literally the thousands gathered for the Macy's parade. As someone said on air, it wouldn't be Thanksgiving without the Macy's parade. If you could imagine all of those scantily clad women in 16-degree temperature slowly freezing to death. But the parade went on, and it was magnificent. It reminded me that at this time of the year, there was another parade. In fact, there were 2 parades. And they took place in a big city. It was the eve of Passover, the high Jewish festival days, where literally thousands of Jews from all over the Mediterranean basin flocked to Israel and make pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And such was the case on that particular time, where thousands came to Jerusalem, and the Roman governor, to take precautions, ordered that the cavalry and the infantry would send a division of troops from Maritima on the coast into Jerusalem. And they came. 1,000 horsemen, spears showing, gleaming in the sunlight, dust rising all over the crowds who stood silently watching these invaders. And they had no sooner passed than the dust had settled when a division of foot soldiers paraded by. Crowds lining the roads, but silent. Silent. These were not their countrymen. These were not their friends. These were the soldiers who would kill indiscriminately. And they marched, and they marched, and they marched. And their presence was a reminder that Caesar ruled. Caesar ruled. But later that day there was another parade, far different. It didn't come from the coast, from Caesar's summer home. It came from the mountains, from the area of Galilee. They didn't march uniformly. They were peasants. Peasants. And there were Jews from all over who had come for those high holy days in their temple, which in that era was one of the 7 wonders of the world. They were basically a Jewish, joyful crowd. And in the midst of them, that second parade, there was a donkey. Not the stallions that the legions used, a poor man's donkey. And on that donkey sat a man, a Jew, and people followed him. When the soldiers went by, the crowds that lined the road were silent. When the donkey rider came by, the crowds cheered, yelling things like, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They pulled palm branches down and lined the roads to keep the dust off of him. That was the second parade. And the difference between those two parades is like the difference between night and day. Two parades, two far different forces at work. One force generating fear, and the other generating hope. Two parades. The collision of those two forces was inevitable. It always has been and always will be. Just as it is today. They are the forces of fear and the forces of hope. Which will prevail? Which will prevail? I must admit that I am not hopeful. The recent election in many instances exposed non-cooperation, a cry of defiance. Our own governor's race ended not with a vow of cooperation, but with a rallying cry of defiance. A journalist for a leading newspaper is murdered while securing a marriage license for his bride. And it's swept under the carpet. There is no official condemnation. A journalist for one of our major newspapers. In that long ago confrontation between Pilate and Jesus, the Roman governor of Israel, asked Jesus a very simple question, simple on the surface. What is truth? What is truth? This Sunday is designated in our prayer book as Christ the King Sunday. The irony is that it was first declared Christ the King Sunday in 1872 by the Pope. But when the Protestant churches decided that they would cooperate and create a common lectionary, that all would read the same lessons on Sundays, they adopted that practice that this Sunday would be Christ the King Sunday. And on this Sunday, Protestant churches all over the world, as well as the Roman Church, read the same lessons. So that Pilate's question is asked in at least 50 languages. What is truth? What is truth? See, the encounter between Jesus and Pilate raises a basic question. Who is in charge? Who is in charge? Who is in charge in your life and who is in charge in my life? When I was a college chaplain and an adjunct faculty member, meeting with students on a regular basis, every now and then, at least once a year, if not once a semester, I have a group of students together, and I'd ask that question. Who's in charge in your life? Students answered, first of all, it's the university. They make me go to class. They say I can take this and I can't take that. They tell me when I can eat and when I can't eat. And they give me a sorry roommate. I had to clean that one up. But we would hear this. And now I ask them about others. That relationships are important, but you have to choose. Choose who is going to be a factor and a force in your life. Who is going to be in charge of your life? Not just in the university, not just in your early years, but later. I recall counseling a co-ed who had earlier in the day received the results of a test. It wasn't a test in history, it was a pregnancy test. And she was pregnant. She blamed her boyfriend who pressured her to have sex. She had feared losing him, so she consented. Fairly common. I asked her, is he going to marry you and father the child and help raise him? And her answer was, no, that would screw everything up. On spring break, she got an abortion. You see, you and I are responsible for determining who and what guides us in our lives. And that being the case, then it is necessary that we must gather. You and I gather on a regular basis, at least every week, to do politics. Didn't know you were doing politics here, did you? But the basic political question is, who is in charge of your life and my life? If we open up the Scriptures and truly meditate on them, read the words and tell the stories, we review our lives in this world, and we do that in light of a very peculiar vision. A vision of who is in charge. Who is in charge? And we search for the answer to that question is, what is truth? You see, much of our church time is taken up with those political questions. Who is in charge? What is truth? What do you lead in your life? We take it up by study and debate and prayerful examination. And there are ultimately only two basic questions. who is king, and what kind of king is our king. That's what Pilate asked. Are you the king? Who is king? What kind of king? See, the answers to that question are the very basic things for your life and my life. A quote I leave with you. It is of such great importance to know who sits on the throne. When the world seems to be coming apart and storm clouds gather and it seems more like night than dawn, it is important to know who is in charge. It is great freedom, a source of sure courage to know who sits on the throne. Amen.